Today is the 6th of May. We're having a MicroProfile technical call. Please help out with minutes and also add your name to the minutes as well. Okay, let me share the screen share. So it's kind of the MicroProfile tutorial. So it's actually it's all the chapters has been kind of merged in, or the PRs for the chapters has been merged in. So it's if you look at the tutorial site, so it's 11 chapters so far. Still have like 2 open PRs. So it's one is in draft, the other one is reviewed, but asked Turan to make some change. So this is a kind of remaining thing on the MicroProfile tutorial. The other thing is last time Turan asked the tutorial UI repo created. So it's I basically created this repo, but Turan need to populate this repo with the UI kind of all the information, etc. So this is pretty much a remaining task for Turan to do. And thanks for everybody, and who helped out with all the reviews and etc. We are getting there. So this is for tutorials. Are there any comments and etc. for this comment for the MicroProfile tutorial? Okay, so the next thing is the MicroProfile 7.1 release. So it's kind of the 7.1 release. We mentioned last time. So basically, this is the plan. We're supposed to release the 7.1 release now actually. But because of all the kind of the Eclipse Foundation infrastructure issues and etc. And then the kind of the CI job was still not available. It looks like it's a lot of data was got lost, and then they have some recovery plan, but it will take time to get everything back to normal. One thing I want to share is luckily, actually, before the infrastructure went down, I staged all of the MicroProfile 7.1 kind of the release and etc. Kind of we can start a ballot basically with all this, because I checked. So basically I staged out 7.1 and also OpenAPI 4.1 and then telemetry 2.1. The only thing is kind of we delayed a bit to see whether we can consume the latest OTel releases. However, that's kind of pretty much OTel has releases every I think it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks. I can't remember. So it's that's kind of we can release for this stage, the final release is all good. So there's no other kind of issues and etc. I think it's we can go ahead with ballot with all this. So it's also previously didn't go ahead because also trying to use Quarkus, but now it's since Quarkus will not basically consume the RCs and etc. Open Liberty, I worked with the dev teams in the Open Liberty. So we have all the artifacts and they're ready for the next beta. So it's we can once the Open Liberty next beta is available, hopefully in the next next week or week after, and then we can do the CCRs kind of the straight away. With that, we can basically release in May for the current MicroProfile 7.1. So are there any concerns and etc.?
Does any
Okay.
of the infrastructure problems that Jakarta EE is having, is any of that impacting us here?
Luckily, no, because I staged the final release before the crash.
No.
Yeah. Another thing is right now is the kind of Jakarta EE trying to see whether they can influence the infrastructure team to restore their CI jobs earlier. So it's I think it's a lot of project probably is trying to do the kind of the trying to basically queue up. I don't know when the whole infrastructure will be back. So it's luckily we have everything in place, staged out. So we don't need to like jam that kind of restoration and etc.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. And then I will, once the Open Liberty driver is available, we'll have the CCR created. We will start a ballot. So that's good. The other thing is kind of the John has started a namespace discussion. So John, do you want to take this? Yeah, through.
Sure. You want to click on the link there?
Yeah.
So in the last live hangout last week, we discussed doing a straw poll, but I thought we'd, well, first of all, even take a step further back. The idea is before we go to ballot for any, on the proposal to maybe move MicroProfile into Jakarta, we want to have, I think, as much of our pre-known decisions, where people stand on various aspects known, right? So namespace, branding, profile name, other things like that. So the idea is for each of these where it makes sense to do a straw poll. But before we did a straw poll, I thought we should maybe have a short discussion. And so that's what this post is. Unfortunately, we've only had 2 posts so far in response. Reza basically said, well, here's the 3 options. Sorry, in order of precedent, the 3 things that are interesting to Microsoft, the 3 approaches to dealing with the namespace. Although none of them is a deal breaker, right? So this is just an order of preference. I don't quite know how to the numbers and the order are not in sync. But I do think the way he described it in the past, I would kind of read it from the top down. Change the namespace to Jakarta, then add MicroProfile to the Jakarta namespace, and then the last one there is keep or did eclipse that MicroProfile. Scott, you also responded this morning. Do you want to kind of give an overview of your feelings about the namespace?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I don't want to have our customers and our products impacted by what I view as a pointless namespace change. I mean, it's not required by any Jakarta process. It's just to me, it's a bad look for the project, given we want to expand it, and we've already gone through a namespace change that was a massive waste of time. So, I mean, it's as simple as that.
In light of this, for the companies, don't feel like this deal breaker, so they can specify their preferences. For the companies who feel this is deal breaker, probably the kind of just choose the option they feel they can accept. Probably this is kind of, and then based on the kind of the discussion, etc., will come up with the kind of the sentence for straw poll. Is that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we just started the discussion. Emily and me mentioned that in the Jakarta call, platform call today. So yeah, I plan to give my view that will not be break of the decision to merge. But yeah, as I took the feedback on Javaland regarding the namespace change and the feedback from the community, as I said last week, I think keeping the namespace is just technical debt, and users not interested in historical reasons why this is named this and that. They just want to easily use and consume that, and so I'm voting for move it to the Jakarta namespace. But I will document that. And I like the way we started that discussion, and yeah, it seems like the Jakarta platform call attendees understand our approach. So finding out if there is something that could be a red line on the decision to merge the working groups, and finding out what is the preference of the people regarding that aspect especially.
But yeah, may I ask, why do your community thinks that they cannot use this easily today with the current namespace? Why is that considered legacy? I mean, a namespace is just a namespace, and especially with today's IDEs, right? In most of the times, I never look into the namespace, right? You just look for things for the class name. As long as you only have like a single class name, you usually don't even look into the namespace, right? I mean, I do understand the reason why we had to move JavaX to Jakarta, because we effectively have no power to evolve those packages. But on the MicroProfile side, I don't see that issue.
Yeah, but the users expect that, in Jakarta, they use the Jakarta namespace. There is some technical debt on the Jakarta side too, because for the wrong reasons, the Jakarta folks decided to not use Jakarta for the TCK, but that's a completely different story. That might be a good reason to keep the existing namespace if that is required to change according to Jakarta or MicroProfile too, because that completely does not make sense. But that's a completely different story that need to discuss on the Jakarta side. But we need to make sure that beginners don't need to get explained why there is, in this case, the MicroProfile namespace to be used, and when it's on the other side, sometimes it's Jakarta. That just makes things complicated to use.
Well,
And
isn't that the same argument that you can use when you have things like Java Lang and versus Jakarta, right? So I mean, if you're as a beginner, you also have to explain the difference between Java and Jakarta.
Yeah, but when it's in the Jakarta working group, then Jakarta is the expected default and not something else. And
yeah, but in this case, that's what you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, we don't agree with that statement at all, Jan. And the issue with the TCK was well argued as well. Again, it was pointless to force vendors to have to deal with non-API artifacts under the Jakarta namespace.
Yeah, but MicroProfile gives the proof that that is possible and don't is an issue at all. The reason is why that was decided is that some implementations abuse the Jakarta namespace already for internal testing, for example. And Tomcat is an implementation which does that. And it was laziness from my perspective.
Okay, you call it laziness, I call it excess.
But that's a different discussion. And the longer one.
And so
It
what
is.
we suggest to do with the things that are currently on maintenance or even deprecated, things like metrics and tracing. I mean, some users they still use that. So are we going to also have to, and we haven't released any of that things we deprecated or removed those from the platform, and it just became like standalone specs that people can use freely. So are we going to go back and have to move those as well, and then release them on new GAD?
No, that makes no sense. And furthermore,
That's my point.
we potentially have to continue to do org Eclipse MicroProfile service releases for, whatever reason, whatever maintenance. So, I mean, the Jakarta MP working group spec project will need to continue to release under that namespace.
That's an interesting point, and a thing that need to be discussed anyway. Which versions will be supported after that move, and that determines when that move should happen. So it would be really interesting to know which versions will be supported when the working groups are merged and the MicroProfile content is moved to Jakarta. And of course, yeah, when a service release need to be done on an existing version of MicroProfile specifications, maybe because of a security issue that need to be fixed, then it need to keep the original namespace, because otherwise it will be a breaking change and requires a major release.
I think personally, I think keeping the namespace is a much better option, because as Roberto said, it's basically I will never type my namespace. It's all worked out by IDs. If we have multiple namespace, and immediately you have to choose. It's no longer organized import works. You have to choose which namespace. If you make a mistake, or some of them from org.eclipse.microprofile and messed up with the Jakarta MicroProfile, and then you have a hill, basically the thing to debug, because all they come from different versions and etc. So this is the one thing. The other thing is kind of think forward for the releases. If we from for example, for the for MicroProfile telemetry 2.1, we release and MicroProfile, and then if we change the namespace again, that will be a 3.0 become a Jakarta, and then it's kind of the previous version, the apps have to go through massive kind of the migration path, and trying to basically going through to change all these kind of namespace and etc. It's unnecessary change, and a lot of effort involved for this, and also the version mismatch and etc. I think it's kind of for supporting model is kind of quite difficult as well. And if we keep the current namespace business as usual, so it's kind of because the Jakarta and MicroProfile working together quite nicely right now, and then even if a working group merge, that's pretty much you can see there's no impact to the developers. It's pretty much is kind of working group matters and etc. It's non-technical things.
Yeah, and again, another perspective is if we want Jakarta to be seen as the healthy environment that is capable of expanding, which includes potentially integration of projects, it should be open to expanding its namespace as well. I mean, the marketing is a whole nother thing. I mean, frankly, what Reza is talking about can be strictly handled by marketing level details that are not important to a developer in terms of impacting existing implementations. It also does not impact our existing products. I mean, the namespace is not something that's part of a marketing issue. I think that's being conflated unnecessarily.
Yeah, but it's linked. So the Maven coordinates
It's an
should.
artifact of the spec project, which will clearly be branded Jakarta.
Yeah, and that is then not in sync with the Maven coordinates and the package name.
The Maven coordinates are also completely separate from the artifact. The
Yeah,
actual,
but that's my point.
artifact
The
versus the
users don't expect that. They do a Maven repository search
There
on
is no
Central.
solid connection between the artifact coordinates and the namespace coordinates. There is
That's
no
the way
consistency in the
users
Java.
use it.
That is not true. That is completely false.
No, that was feedback from the Javaland, from the community, where I
Okay,
discussed
your
that.
community says that. I don't buy that for our users. Well, I'm talking from our user perspective and our existing products.
I mean, I think it could be reasonable to release MicroProfile APIs on the new GAV under Jakarta, but the GAV can be completely separate from the namespace. I mean, and in most cases, I mean, if you look into the GAV name, you have no idea what the package name looks like, right? Because some is just like a merge between the group ID and the artifact ID. Some others will just take a piece of the group ID. So I don't see how users can guess or know which package name they do expect when they look into a GAV or when they search for a GAV, because in many cases those are not related at all.
Right.
Anyway, I think it's reasonable for Jakarta to release, like if we keeping the MicroProfile namespace. I think it could be reasonable for Jakarta to release new versions on a new GAV on Jakarta, especially because it's really easy for you to create relocations on Maven, right? So you can easily set up a relocation rule saying, well, this new GAV relocates over there. So it's going to be, it could be like a transparent things to the users, and we're not really breaking anything. But at least for the sake of marketing on saying, okay, here are dependencies for MicroProfile or whatever. Yes, now they're branded Jakarta, and I think that's fine. And that can be done without incurring into breaking changes, right? Now the namespace, I think we have to be really, really more careful, right? I mean, as I said, I think it was fine, and I think it was okay to convince users that the JavaX to Jakarta was no other way around it. On the MicroProfile side, I mean, I haven't really heard a good argument for that. And I mean, I'm sorry, Jan, just like community saying yes, it's because they feel that's legacy. I mean, we're been using like legacy packages since like 20 years ago, and those are fine. So I don't really see an issue in that.
Yeah, we are experts spending decades on these technologies and know all this history, reasons why things are this or that. But newbies do not understand that, and they do not care about the history. They are just getting confused and say, oh, Java is so complicated, so I do better to go and use that for implementing business logic, which is shocking. But
did you actually hear that when users complain that Java is complicated, it's about the package namespaces, and when you have like so many? Because I mean, other technologies also have namespaces, and they're all spread all around. Look at Python, for instance; it's even more crazy, right? And usually, what I hear complaints about Java is not about the namespace; it's about, I mean, as a newbie coming in, I mean. And especially when you compare things to as Python, right? They just write like a Notepad or a text file in Python, just run it directly, right? In Java, you need the JVM, you need to like compile it, right? And do a lot of other crazy things. You need to create like a public static void main. And I mean, of course, you're gonna tell me there are already solutions for that, but those are the first complaints that I hear about newbies coming to Java. Quite frankly, I never heard people complaining about the namespace or having like different namespaces, because you have that happening in other languages and in other ecosystems, and especially if you go and start doing heavy business logic, right? You're not going to just be on the Jakarta namespace, right? You're going to have to go and use common slang. You're going to have to go and use, I mean, some people use Lombok, right? So you're going to use like Lombok package. You're going to use common slangs package. You're going to use Google package for JSON and other stuff, right? So usually when you're building, I mean, come on, Jan, tell me something. Are you only have Jakarta namespace packages in your projects?
No, I'm using a lot Camel, and there are a lot of yeah, libraries
Sure. So
involved.
so that's the argument, right? So it's just another library that's like living in another namespace, right? I mean, if you want to shield the users about MicroProfile in Jakarta, you're not shielding him against everything else, and that's quite impossible to do.
There is one problem
But
that I see with
yeah.
newbies with namespaces, and that is when they get confused about which one to use, because they end up with, they're trying to import something from supposed to be from Jakarta, and they take the Java X one instead. They don't even realize it, and then they wonder why things aren't working and it's getting ignored.
Okay, but exactly, but that's exactly point where
Yeah, that's in support of your point, Roberto.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the exact point where when you have the rename, right? You may end up with two different class names, or I mean, two different class names in the sense that because it's a fully qualified name, right? And even a server cannot shield you for that, because you can import a library that's importing also transitively an old library from Javax, and then yeah, you may end up seeing like one from Javax and one for Jakarta, right? Now, again, when I want to write, let's just say config, I'm not going to write on my IDE. I'm not going to write io microprofile dot eclipse dot config, right? I just write config, and then the IDE will automatically fill us up there and imports it for me, and I don't even know the namespace, right? As long as I have like a single entry.
Yeah,
Well,
what the
plus,
newbies, yeah, sorry.
I mean, for the longest time, right, we've had multiple namespaces in Java EE, right? There were Corbin namespaces. We had the Java X namespace. I forgot who made the point last week. Maybe it was Roberto, but there were, there's the Java SE namespace, and then there was the Java EE namespace, right? So we have, as an ecosystem, dealt with multiple namespaces over the years. That's it. That's my point.
Yes, I mean that's the point. I mean, even Jakarta, right? You have APIs from Jakarta that reference the Java namespace directly, right? That it's even embedded on the APIs, for instance, for things like completable futures and things like that on the concurrent specification, right? So even when you're on Jakarta, you may be exposed to like Java and Jakarta, right? And so what's the argument there? Are users going to be confused because they have like on a Jakarta API, it's using like a Java API, a namespace?
So let's Ed, does Oracle have thoughts here? I also see you're off mute. I'm not sure if that was an accident or not.
Well, so my number one preference is to combine the two groups, right? So whatever needs to happen. If it were up to me, I would say, let's form the technical groups, the committer teams for these, and whatever they decide, right? I think these. I would like to see as few constraints, placed on that group. I don't know. I guess I would say I would like to trust them to do the right thing, whatever that is.
Sorry, that group.
The newly formed committer teams that take responsibility for the component specs once
Yeah,
when they're
okay.
migrated to
The
Jakarta.
Jakarta MicroProfile specification project.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be the Jakarta MicroProfile specification project,
Well, right. So I mean,
or
I
whatever.
guess my presumption is that each of the component specs would be split into, would become their own Jakarta EE spec. But I
Well,
guess
think-
that's a presumption. I don't know if that's actually what will happen.
That's not the way I was looking at it. I was looking at it to be more like CDI, where it has multiple specs.
Right, but
I mean, have we had that conversation?
I don't know.
Not
So-
yet. That was a separate point. I think there was the idea to keep the existing MicroProfile committers, and when it's split up into separate Jakarta component specs and an umbrella spec called MicroProfile, that the existing MicroProfile committers would be assigned to it, and somebody else said, no, that should be an election per spec. But there must be a starting group to make that happen that can do that election.
Right, but I guess, Jan, the question Scott's raising is it one or is it, a couple handfuls, right? I've been presuming that there would be this would be a set of new component specs that would be added to Jakarta EE, and I guess, so maybe that needs to be, I mean, if that requires clarification, okay. Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I
The
agree.
reason CDI works for me is because it's all, focused on a relatively straightforward concern, right?
Right.
Some specifications can exist within, a parent project, but they're still separate specifications. So if
Right.
you're referring to interceptors in CDI, right? They're still separate specs.
Yeah, so I basically share the plan, the repo plan. So basically, like Prof. Scott, you missed that conversation. So all of the MicroProfile spec will have their dedicated repository. And the current MicroProfile committers, I think it's about over 50, will be assigned to each individual MicroProfile kind of the new project. So it's basically that's a starting point. So it's for the release, so logically, for the umbrella release, logically, these 7 MicroProfile specs will be grouped under that MicroProfile kind of release. So it's kind of the pretty much. So in the future, like if we move this move the MicroProfile to Jakarta, for example, finger in the air, in, for example, September, 1st September. So it's 55 MicroProfile committers will be the committers for the, basically the newly created MicroProfile specs. For example, MicroProfile, REST client, and etc. On the, after the 1st September, if it's a new people contributed to a particular specs, and he will be basically committer, will be nominated for that committer, to be the committer for that project. So basically it's the plan is to move the current committers to be the committers for all the MicroProfile specs. But in the future, and there will be a separate basically committer list. So for this namespace decision, based on what Ed said, to be decided by the kind of newly formed MicroProfile Jakarta committers. So that's pretty much the current MicroProfile committers.
So I think it could be reasonable to have certain pieces to move to namespace. As an example, right? We know that for a long time, Jakarta REST wants to take over REST client. And once that is on Jakarta, I think it will make perfect sense to merge both. And in that case, I think it's acceptable to rename what's on Jakarta on MicroProfile REST client to Jakarta, right? Because if they end up merging, right? But other pieces, let's just say like OpenAPI, which is totally separate, and at least there is no foreseeable merging point to other specifications. In that case, I think it doesn't have to move. Other hybrid scenarios like config, right, that has been discussed for a long time. If it ends up having like a new config spec, then of course, let's just say MicroProfile config becomes deprecated, and then everyone just moves to the new Jakarta config, right? But those decisions, I think, like Ed said, should be made by each individual specification, and especially figuring out how things are going to move forward with everything over there, right?
Yeah, I think when that is a decision by the component spec team, yeah, then it can create more friction than if the decision made to move the namespace at all, or don't move it until it's integrated, or that's a special case. Another case for MP telemetry, for example, there is no API consumed by the user with the namespace. So that could be converted because it's only affecting the TCK.
Yeah, but if you remember, there was like a huge discussion about telemetry because some commuters, and there's some, I mean, don't remember who it was, it doesn't really matter, but many wanted to duplicate the APIs on OpenTelemetry because with the argument saying that we didn't want to be, or Jakarta didn't want to be, or MicroProfile didn't want to be dependent on them, right? And in this particular case, if OpenTelemetry moves to Jakarta, right? So you're gonna have the exact same situation you were mentioning, right? You have like different namespaces over there because then you're gonna have the OpenTelemetry API that you have that you could use right on your project, which is different from the Jakarta namespace.
Yeah, that is a discussion that need to be held within Jakarta if that is acceptable. Maybe an API artifact could be created that just consists of dependencies to these OpenAPI OpenTelemetry API artifacts. But yeah, that is a special case that should be pointed out, and the discussion should start on the Jakarta side. If that decision that was made within MicroProfile for good reasons is still valid on the Jakarta side.
Well, I mean, of course, I cannot say anything from the Jakarta side, but I will expect that the same good reasons that we consider on the MicroProfile will consider over there. I mean, I think you already seen what the OpenTelemetry group has been doing. I mean, it is a project hosted on the Cloud Native Foundation. All the major vendors are contributed on the APIs, right? So they have experts working on the APIs, right? Why should we try to be smarter than them and try to do something different, because I mean, I'm pretty sure there are a couple of open language APIs on our side, but not as much as they have on their side.
Yeah, I fully agree. The at the moment, Ivor said that to me. There is no strict rule that there cannot be a different namespace be used for a Jakarta API specification. So that rule just was not written down. As he said, nobody has even thought about use something else than Jakarta. But it was JavaX at the beginning during the transition. And that might be the reason why that is not written down anywhere. So yeah, but that's something that need to be pointed out.
I don't think there's any restriction what a namespace can be used. Especially the MicroProfile namespace is allowed, which is already owned by Eclipse Foundation. So from a legal point of view, I don't think that's the concern. Okay, we have this conversation. I know it's kind of the like we have to agree on the disagreement, and then the kind of the encourage the people to express their view on this mailing list for this namespace discussion. So John, do we need to put a deadline for this conversation? When do you want the feedback to be provided so that we can start a straw poll?
Well, I think what I'm going to do is I am going to send an email, reply to my own thread with a link to a bookmark, right, of this section. So this kind of continues that online discussion, right? What we've done here. I was kind of hoping some folks that aren't in MicroProfile but are in Jakarta, some of the members would participate, but I understand it's a little bit hard. Like they may not even know about it, right? Because it's on the MicroProfile working group list. But I think in a day or two we could actually start this straw poll, right? To see where we stand.
So John, you are saying you are reply to the mailing list with you want to reply to the mailing list with basically clarify like what we discussed earlier. So it's if the deal red line and just list the option they are comfortable with, and if not deal breaker, like list the preferences order. Is that something you can?
Well, I was going to point to I was going to add this bookmark. Well, here, I can just do it.
The bookmark to this minutes?
Oh, that's your recording. Yeah.
Okay.
Not to the whole minutes, just to this section here. So I'll do insert bookmark.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is reply to my own thread with this bookmark, right, saying continued discussion. What we have to talk about is how to phrase the straw poll, right? So far, I've seen the three options: keep the namespace the way it is, move it to Jakarta. Well, they're basically the ones in Reza's Reza's response, right? And the third one is Jakarta.microprofile.asterisk, which still breaks the namespace, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's two fundamental issues. One is it as Reza stated at the start, is this a red line? Is it a hard requirement that there's a namespace change for people to have MicroProfile move into Jakarta? And two, no, if no, then the namespace needs to be resolved after the fact.
Yeah,
And
so
what it
actually that's a
is
good point.
separate discussion.
Yeah,
Because I mean, you can have a hard, it's a huge argument as to what a new namespace is, if there's a namespace change.
right.
You could also have Jakarta.mp, you could have, you know, a million things.
So actually, that's a good point. So maybe the phrasing of the straw poll would be the red line verbiage. Is it a red line if we keep the MicroProfile namespace? Because that's really what we're getting down to, right? And then if it doesn't pass, to your point, it's like, okay, what will the namespace be? If it does pass, that kind of answers the question. Because after we get these discussions and these straw polls done, at that point, I think we'll present to the broader Jakarta EE steering committee. This is the result of discussions between, within the MicroProfile community, right? And some of the members are in both Jakarta and MicroProfile, right? Not everyone's voting in the Jakarta or voting members, but are members in both. So I kind of like that. I think I'm also going to respond to that discussion thread with that point. That's a very good point, Scott.
But
So-
that was how I understood it, and I didn't read your comment, Scott, yet, but that's how Razor was responding too, right? He said, that's not an issue for us in general, but my preference is this.
Right.
Right. I mean, basically the issue is the merging of the MicroProfile working group into Jakarta with or without namespace as a technical roadblock. So I think you need to be able to separate those out. So if there's people that are again willing to merge the working groups without concern for the namespace, and then there's people that require a specific namespace in order for it to merge.
Okay. Well, I think we've got an overall approach. So let's start the straw poll in a day or two. So before the next meeting, we'll have a straw poll.
Okay, so John, for the straw poll, what I said here is that a straw poll you're going to use? What kind of?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. It's just going to be via the mailing list. It's not going to be like a survey monkey or anything. It's just going to be on the mailing list. It'll be +1 -1 0.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know whether you see my screen. So I'm asking the straw. I put on here minutes. So your start a straw poll. The straw poll is the red line to keep the namespace.
Well,
What
that's the gist of it. It won't be that exact wording, but that's the gist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem, John, is okay with that. You need to have +1. It's a little complicated because how are you going to tally the votes? Because you basically have 3 things, I guess. You have merge working groups, no concern for namespace as a top level concern. Merge working groups with a specific namespace, and then
Well, we haven't gotten to the broader point.
The problem is you can't distinguish. I mean, if you have the problem with that scheme for voting is if you have a specific requirement for a namespace that's not decided. So basically, to me, it would have to be merge working groups, no concern for namespace as a top level issue. Merge working groups with existing namespace. Merge working groups with a new namespace. To me, those would be the three levels that you need to tally.
Yeah, well, here's the broader problem is, like, how do you do a ballot resolution that's not overly complex, right?
Yeah,
In
but
terms of the merging proposal. So the idea is we try to come to some agreement out of band of the resolution, right? And we all kind of know where everyone is um, ahead of time. Hopefully, we can come to a consensus, right, about what we're going to do ahead of time, or at least we'll know what's going to pass and not going to pass, and hopefully nobody changes their mind at the last minute, right, which is a possibility. So when we do a proposal to move MicroProfile in, so for these more controversial issues, important issues, especially this one because it's a breaking change for customers, then we'll already know what the answer is going to be, right?
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
I'm open to other ideas, but that's the hope.
Well, yeah, I mean, but so is this you writing this, Emily?
What do you mean? The
The
readiness?
document? Those 3 points in the document are the right ones. I mean, that's what we need the straw pull on.
I just write down like what we need to find out these
Yeah.
three options. However, God, to
Mhm.
join the point, is if we work out this straw poll, if we say it's basically, for example, Red Hat is at +1, keep the existing namespace. So basically, Red Hat fall into basically this one. And then is another company, for example, Ajax is the -1. So that would be fall into this one. And then for others, if it's the +0, and then fall into this
Yeah.
one.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but
The
I
problem with
think
this,
Yeah.
so, sorry, Jan. The problem with this is that, folks like Reza said, this is our preference. So if they have to answer, if Reza has to answer this question, um,
Yeah, but
where is it?
it is, so the issue still is, though, who's opposed to merging the working groups if there's a namespace package namespace requirement? I mean, effectively, that's the conversation. Reza isn't not in that camp. His preference does not put him in, we're not merging the working groups.
It's
Right, and that's what I'm
what
trying to get to is not preference, but if you were to come to you could state a preference in the discussion thread, but you could in state it's not a red line, right? That's
Yeah.
what I want to get to. Is if this were a real ballot, where would you stand?
Yeah, and I think we have to vote to merge the working groups from the MicroProfile side, and then they need to be accepted on the Jakarta side on the steering committee.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure if everybody will be on board, or there's at least consensus to merge the working groups, even if some preferences are not met. And one of the preferences is the namespace discussion. And yeah, like we do in the current discussion regarding the namespace, saying, yeah, this is not a showstopper for me, merging the working groups, that, yeah, gives the path for merging the working group. If somebody says, oh no, this is a real concern for us to vote on the whole merge, then that is crossing their red line, and then that should be, yeah, known before, I would say. And that is what we want to find out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well,
so
we're at the top of the hour, Emily.
yeah, we're on the top of the hour, have 2 more minutes. So with that, basically is so John, we could have 2 straw poll. One straw poll is kind of the merging MicroProfile to Jakarta. Do you support these activities? And the details, like this overall, initiative. The second thing is kind of is moving MicroProfile to Jakarta, keep the existing namespace. Basically, we just say 0, do not mind, +1 for -1 again.
Yeah, I just don't think we're ready for that first one yet, right? Because the first one is going to depend on, I think, the results of these discussions. So really, now we could get there, right? But I want to know where we stand with the namespace before we begin asking about, whether you would vote for the proposal or not.
So
Even-
then the vote can be like for asking, does the namespace decision or the future namespace of the MicroProfile specs within Jakarta determines your decision on the working group merge, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the wording would be something like that.
Because that you can answer with a +1 or -1.
Yeah.
So I have my kind of the concern is if people don't even want to do the working group like merges, and we go into the fine details, they say, oh, for the merge, do you want the namespace change or no? I said, okay, I don't even support this merge. Why are you asking me that like a follow-on question? So basically,
we need to have a separate discussion on the merging itself, for sure. And at the end, we need to have a ballot on that.
Yeah, so basically, all I want to say is basically is for the overall kind of the direction, and whether like roughly do you support this based on your expectation. So it's basically remove this working group, MicroProfile working group, and etc. Anyway, it's the top of the hour. So John, you and I can meet up again. So we will try
Yeah.
to work out a plan and then move forward. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you all for.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.